Good morning, everyone. This is day 3 of our mead making process, and I wanted to just talk a little bit about what's actually happening inside each of the carboys. Remember that the carboy is the actual vessel, or in this case our jugs, that we're actually fermenting our mead in. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the stages of yeast fermentation, as well as what happens with the impact of what happens when you put in fruits of some sort. So for example, the blackberries, or in this case, raisins in with the chamomile vanilla mead. So we'll talk a little bit about it, and we'll find out what is actually happening in these carboys with all of this yeast. I just want to give you a few terms that will help you understand the yeast process. So yeast goes through several stages. The first stage is the lag phase, and usually that's within the first 0 to 12 hours. And it's the initial period where pitching the yeast and there's little visible activity. It's the yeast just getting used to its new environment and is starting to absorb nutrients. Following that, there is the growth phase, and that is when the yeast cells rapidly multiply and begin to ferment, and that's when you get to see all the bubbles in the yeast, from the yeast in the carboys. You can see that here with the bubbling of the berries, and I'll do some zooming in here in a little bit, as well as in the chamomile. You can see the bubbles down here. Also in the airlock, you can see bubbles, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. After the growth phase, there's an exponential growth phase, and that is the peak time for yeast to reproduce, and it's really increasing the bubbles and the population of yeast significantly. After that, there's a deceleration growth phase, and that is when the yeast reproduction is starting to slow down. And lastly is a stationary phase, and that's when fermentation slows down significantly, and that's when most of the fermentable sugars are consumed and yeast cells begin to settle. So that's really the phases. Hopefully you are understanding a little bit about what's happening. So it's more than just bubbles. Things are really happening with the yeast and fermentation. Next, I wanted to really hone in on the blackberry mead because this is where you can really see the fermentation taking place. Adding fruit to the start of fermentation, it's also known as that primary fermentation stage. It really makes a significant impact on the final flavor profile of the mead. It's allowing the yeast to ferment directly with the fruit sugars in addition to the honey sugars. So you can see here, if I zoom in, you can see that actually happening right there. What this does is it results in a more pronounced fermented fruit taste rather than just a fresh fruit flavor. So a lot of people consider this the preferred method for creating a true fruit mead, also known as a melomel. And that's where the fruit is really a prominent flavor in the mead making process. So here is the vanilla bean chamomile mead. This one's a little funky. When I put the chamomile flowers in, you can see that they just expanded from being in the liquid. You can see the raisins at the top. The raisins are what will help with fermentation as well. And the vanilla bean is in there somewhere too. So this is again fermenting, and you can see here, you can see some of the bubbles down in the mead, and I'll be talking about the airlock where you can also see that happening. These are the two airlocks. The one on the left is the blackberry airlock, and the one on the right is the vanilla bean chamomile airlock. We actually had to clean out the water of the vanilla bean chamomile because it had started so quickly that the airlock filled to the top, and it was above the line where water's supposed to be added. So what the airlock does is it allows the carbon dioxide gas that's produced during fermentation to escape from the carboy while preventing outside air from entering the carboy. So basically, it lets the gas out, but keeps unwanted things from getting in. What's fun about this is you can sit and watch and you can see that carbon dioxide gas actually being released by seeing the bubbles in the airlock. So that is really the process that's happening right now with the carboys and the mead making process. This is day 3, and it's a pretty exciting time. It's really fun to watch and see what's happening inside each of the carboys.